Web 3.0, bringing the world back right side up. We begin by recalling pertinent points from our previous videos. That the world, since Martin Luther's Protestant Revolution, was turned upside down, and that at its most fundamental can be traced back to Adam and the fruits of original sin. But given the supernatural outlook isn't considered prime in the modern world, we did not and shall not go there but merely mention that the history of the world can be summarized as a struggle between two opposing forces, centralization and decentralization, but that mainstream history hasn't exactly properly presented who the real centralization characters are, oft framing villain hero. What we now know is this, that the Protestant reformers were revolutionaries and not reformers. They destroyed and did not reform. Luther was a statist and destroyed the natural and more decentralized world of monarchy and enterprise under the counsel of Catholic monks and clergy. St. Thomas Aquinas and the late scholastics were the first financial analysts and economists. We also looked into some of the more specific consequences of this Lutheran framework. Our governance structures, from the more decentralized, logically ordered, private property-based and dynastic tradition of monarchy, to the highly centralized, emotions, virtue signaling, public property, caretaker model of democracy. Our communication structures, from the more nature-based, hierarchical structure premised on family and the principle of subsidiarity, to the more statist and corporatist systems of society as reflected by the history of mandatory schooling and the broadcast media, particularly the record label controlling music industry. But a decentralizing force soon came about. The internet seemed to give power back to individuals and people, only to be thwarted once again by the centralizing force of convergence, where enterprise was bought and eaten alive by larger corporations and global conglomerates with statist backing and support. Some, however, truly started out as small enterprise, but as soon as success allowed growth, regulators zeroed in and the road to compromise was practically inevitable. Luther turned the world upside down, and this rolled out revolution upon revolution in the name of liberty and freedom, but in reality brought about more control, statism, and ultimately greater disorder, in defiance of the inevitable law of thermodynamics. The more control, the more out of control. We've thus devolved. In this video, we will look into the current, more realistic phenomenon of true reformation, bringing the world right side up from the revolution Luther rolled out, which destroyed the more natural social order and brought the world upside down. Web 3.0 or Convergence 3.0, bringing the world right side up. Governance, enterprise, and community. Tokenization versus a social credit system. We repeat, the history of the world can be summarized as the struggle between centralization and decentralization forces. We are currently at the crux of the more entropic portion of the struggle that has been accelerating the inevitable consequence of entropy at such an exponential rate. We describe these things as noise, clutter, and information overload, and our most popular response has been even more control, more statism, and more corporatism. The two are partners in the centralizing forces ordering the world into their order, oblivious to the natural and inevitable consequences of entropy, accelerating that which they hope to control and probably even stop. We are once again at one of those crucial points of struggle, the natural development of the anarchic phenomenon known as Bitcoin. And it has unintentionally rolled out a following of wannabes that don't quite all understand the essence of Satoshi Nakamoto's invention. As we said in a previous video, Bitcoin grew in the wilds of the internet when no one was looking. A technology and idea Satoshi gave the world in response to the out-of-control control that imploded in 2008, with a global financial crisis that put the current financial system on life support. In addition, with the decentralizing force the invention of the internet unintentionally rolled out, governments and industries were disrupted. Disintermediation isn't actually new. People suddenly had the power to do things they would normally have had to commission a huge corporatist entity to. And we saw this very clearly in the music industry with the rollout of MP3 and Napster, which actually served both artist and fan, but unnerved the gigantic intermediaries, the record labels. I recall needing to spend days and nights at an editing studio just to produce a video such as this, which I can now easily do alone at home on my personal laptop. What used to be a complex activity of various people and intermediaries requiring so much time and money is now so easily done at the fraction of the cost and time. So much so it has bred an entire industry known as content creation. Interestingly, the internet was originally a centralizing force as it came off DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency of the U.S. government, which is primarily about supposedly ensuring U.S. national security, the supposed package of convenience and safety that has been the creed of statism throughout history. But entropy caught up. Well, it was always there, merely obscured and unnoticed by the highly distracted human mind, and the centralizing technology spread and was released into the more anarchic and enterprising realm, where it evolved into the state of the more natural order. The result has been both beautiful and ugly, and the latter, the ugly, mostly because of the state's struggle to regulate and control. As Austrian economists like to oft chant, government decivilizes. Eventually, centralizing status forces via bigger government, more regulation, and what communication textbooks like to refer to as convergence, entropy was accelerated once again. And given the reach of the internet, together with the death of monarchy via the death of the Russian czars and the abolition of various European monarchies, especially the Habsburgs of Austria, the political and media technology arena were synced. Huxley's utopian prison of pleasure was rolled out against the pseudo-enemy that was created under the character of the Soviet Union as Orwell's dystopian 1984. The world was good for the Hollywood, Netflix, Silicon Valley, and now effeminate Korean pop digesting world, numbed and dumbed to pleasure. Unlike the Soviet Union 1984 dystopian framework, however, the utopian prison of pleasure was too alluring and fun to ward off. There was almost no attempt. The world had been made safe for democracy by Marvel, DC, and G.I. Joe. Game of Thrones porn became art. Genders multiplied and the trans type was catapulted to hero. Mental health became an industry and norm, and tiny microorganisms were made to run both the public and private space, sending off the gigantic human being into lockdown and hiding until such time when microorganisms no longer exist. An impossibility, of course, given the resilience of such primitive creatures not bogged down by control, which human beings can't seem to part with. But as the natural order and entropy makes inevitable, there will always be pockets of resistance, and one of the things these pockets of resistance has rolled out is Bitcoin. The fiat fake money system and the entire global financial industry that has colonized the real economy into a house of cards on sand with unicorns and rainbows began its free fall in 2008. Satoshi must have seen the dystopian metaverse that was going to be rolled out by the technology of blockchain, where the seeing eye is melded into brain and eye, where algorithm morphs into AI. Satoshi seems to have given us a chance out and a chance in, to properly play the game of algorithm, AI, blockchain, and control. Bitcoin's success was inevitable given the science and economics of its production and security, 0% trust, 100% verification. Satoshi must have been a student of Aristotle, the late scholastics, and Austrian economics. Satoshi seems to have understood natural law and the second law of thermodynamics. Indeed, its early adopters tended to be of the sort, that kid in the emperor's new clothes. Libertarians, Austrian economists, traditional Catholics, and all other rebels against the current global socialist system. But with its price volatility most to the upside, now the most successful asset class since its inception, it also attracted other sorts. The money-making sort that was produced by the gambling den of futures contracts, repos, reverse repos, rehypothecation, bonds, ETFs, various schemes of IOUs of trust and paper, funded by the fake money fiat system of boom and bust cycles that has bred us into such a complicated web. Indeed, terms such as quantitative easing, rehypothecation, and reverse repo sound so mathematical and smart for the mathematically challenged and diverse. But they are as complicated as the reality, schemes precisely framed as simply too complex for the average mind to grasp. They make cheating in the classroom and the entire third world put together minuscule. This might sound complicated to those and practically all of us who have been bred by the Lutheran school system of obedience to supposed authority and experts, but we shall attempt to summarize at its simplest. Bitcoin isn't just about money. Bitcoin rolled out the reform of our systems of organizing life and society with value, enterprise, and community right at the start, all of which are fundamentally at odds with the essence and goal of centralized status systems in the spirit of Martin Luther and the Protestant revolutionaries. In Bitcoin, governance is based on a real community consensus that isn't premised on trust, and rightly so given the reality of original sin. In Bitcoin, consensus is based on a verification process made possible by its proof-of-work consensus algorithm. As we said in a previous video, Bitcoin is an open public ledger and technology of proof and verification already there on its blockchain, made secure by having already expended gargantuan amounts of energy and processing power that, if anyone were to try to cheat by rolling out an attack and compromise this very open ledger, the amount of time and energy needed would simply not make it worth it for anyone. Not even governments and nation-states with the power to tax their citizens to create a Bitcoin hacking fund would be able to do so, as time had already passed to create the gigantic network which grows by the second, and energy had already been expended and will continue to be expended. Attacking or destroying it would require time more than a lifetime, gargantuan amounts of money not even a nation-state or Silicon Valley millionaire would be able to expend, and all that time, money, and effort getting nothing in return, as the previous and valuable Bitcoin system would have been destroyed. Bitcoin security is practically foolproof and forces even the most evil and dishonest of individuals to be honest. Like we said, it is a system and record of honesty. Right there already encapsulates a natural road for governance, enterprise, and true community. Trust is overrated. Man pats himself on the back too much, and this is what we mean by anthropocentrism. Trust sounds good, benevolent, and heroic, but original sin begs to differ. Verification is the humbler road, placing pressure on man to step up and stay the course. Bitcoin has rolled out a system that has placed cheaters in a rock and a hard place. That is, if they want to continue to cheat. Bitcoin makes possible that which Hans Hermann Hoppe discusses in his book, Civilization. But there is, of course, the natural consequence, or perhaps more accurately, reaction to something that makes and has made many so successful. The gambling den looks at it as a get-rich-quick scheme exporting the habits of global finance and fiat to futures, bonds, repo, reverse repo, and rehypothecation into the blockchain that Bitcoin rolled out. Thus, the creation and minting of a sea of hype and noise in a world filled with Bitcoin wannabes. There are hundreds of other blockchains of all shapes and sizes, some obvious, clear, and direct jokes and schemes, others more insidious, and still others with real authentic dreams of wanting to bring down the cheating system of value and value creation. But none have the unique quality and advantage of Bitcoin. Bitcoin is decentralized and cannot be compromised. And so while Bitcoin can and may help bring the world right side up, forcing and eventually encouraging one into honesty and civilization, there are two things in opposition, both of which are consequences of the gambling den of centralization rolled out since Luther and made parabolic by the invention of fiat and the global reserve currency known as the US dollar. The more obvious of these opposing tendencies is, of course, the ruling order of centralization that was probably already creating and toying with the idea of blockchain technology in order to expand the hold and control of central banks, particularly the Federal Reserve and IMF, disabling the need for commercial banks, the intermediaries they created in the first place and gave the power to create fiat in their local settings, as they did not yet have the technology to do it directly themselves. But this is no longer the case with blockchain. The tech is now here to allow the Fed and IMF to have each citizen of the planet open an account with them and thus have full control over the movement of that which people think is money. In reality, currency created out of thin air based on nothing but their decree, and now they won't even need to print it. This is known as the CBDC, Central Bank Digital Currency, where cultural Marxism will be embedded. What does this mean exactly? Central banks, and eventually just one central bank, probably the Fed or the IMF, or perhaps something with a different label they might create to gain some trust, given both already have tarnished images among the especially well-read. They will create and issue digital currency with the same essence as fiat, only digital, hence based on nothing but their decree. This will be taken a step further as the issued currency, now digital, can be easily controlled, frozen, taken away, or declared and turned zero, depending on one's values and behavior, whether one obeys the Fed, IMF, the World Health Organization, or World Economic Forum's belief system, which can be summed up by the following advocacies: gender, equality, climate change, and obeying their health mandates. Issued digital currencies will have an expiry, and the list of what one is allowed to purchase will be published. And so, given the WEF's concerns about climate change and believe cattle fart contributes to greenhouse gas emissions, they tell us that by 2030, we will no longer be eating meat, that a plant-based diet is preferred, and since currency is centrally controlled, the global citizen won't have much of a choice but to comply.
Aujourd'hui, au bout de ça, on parle de puces qu'on pourra s'implanter. Ce sera quand ça?
Certainement dans les 10 années à venir. Et d'abord, on va les implanter dans nos vêtements, c'est-à-dire wearables, comme on le dit. Et après, on pourrait s'imaginer qu'on les implante dans nos cerveaux ou dans notre peau. Et à la fin, peut-être il y a une communication directe entre notre cerveau et le monde digital. Ce que nous voyons, c'est une sorte de fusion du monde physique, digital et biologique.
On appelle quelqu'un, on n'a même plus le réflexe de devoir prendre un appareil, ça se fait naturellement. Hein. La technique continue le corps.
Oui, vous parlez et vous dites, je veux maintenant être connecté avec n'importe qui.
Hein?
Et d'abord, vous avez les robots personnalisés. Et j'ai vu que M. Zuckerberg a prédit qu'à la fin de l'année, il va avoir son robot, son butler personnalisé qui est à sa disposition.
Donc, comme dans Downton Abbey, on aura son butler personnel, son serviteur, son esclave.
Oui, mais il y a une différence. C'est un serviteur qui, avec l'intelligence artificielle, apprend et qui n'est pas seulement votre assistant pour des travaux manuels, qui peut vraiment être un partenaire intellectuel de vous.
Much has been said about China's social credit system, and because China is the character everyone just loves to hate, the reputation of this social credit system has also been negative. However, those familiar with the intricacies of algorithm and AI know too well this social credit system has been operating outside China for years and is anything but Chinese. Algorithm and AI we are now living with is this social credit system without that social credit system label. Prisons of pleasure are more effective than prisons of pain, as we've realized with the Soviet Union communism versus US democracy experiment. Indeed, democracy is the road to socialism. There is, of course, a lot more to this. It's a huge topic in itself, details of which are beyond the scope of this video. So we turn our attention to the second opposition to the honesty system in civilization, which the Bitcoin blockchain encourages and rolled out. Indeed, this threat to the rollout of honesty and civilization appears as a partner of Bitcoin and those angry with the statist world of mandates and fake money, as they believe some truly do and yet others are merely rolling out the narrative. They are the enterprise of disruption that gives freedom back to people. These are the dozens of alternative blockchains and hundreds of what are called altcoins that have been flooding what looks like what will become the new global financial system. Indeed, it looks like an anarchic and free marketplace, an agora of merchants and customers negotiating value and utility. For customers, it's a marketplace where they can save their dying fiat and wealth from out-of-control inflation rolled out by the money printers who have debased and devalued their currency. Indeed, if you understand the game, you can easily turn a dollar into hundreds of thousands of dollars. And while this may sound like a get-rich-quick scheme, if you understand the underlying basis of all fiat currencies, it's actually a lot more honest than that which traders of crypto are attempting to save their money from. Fiat. Of course, not all cryptocurrencies and assets are the same. Indeed, there are scams and scumbags just as there are in the traditional financial system. But here's the most unnerving reality. The primary reason cryptocurrencies or assets such as Bitcoin have what seems like a ballooning value of such parabolic proportions and thus comes across as gambling is because of the very foundation of the traditional global financial system running on fiat. They've been creating money out of thin air, so much so they've created a pseudo-economy based on air, known as the financial economy, which is now so much bigger than the real economy. The real economy versus the financial economy is the production of goods and services, which may be represented in value by an abstraction known as money. in order to facilitate exchanges and the movement of people and human relations. The financial economy, on the other hand, is the gambling done of paper IOUs and promises given the label of money, even if the paper and IOU doesn't have real value. Or, as is often the case, the same paper asset backed by nothing is sold to multiple people and parties without each knowing there are multiple owners to that supposed bond money or asset. It makes a casino look amateur and laughable as a gambling den. And this financial economy has become the economy. This is what I mean when I say we've been standing on a house of cards on sand, riding unicorns with rainbows and walking on water. Hence explains the likes of Game of Thrones, effeminate Korean pop, abortion, divorce, same-sex marriage, pedophilia, and the rest of the crazy world package that comes with a world losing its mind. Bitcoin is the light at the end of the tunnel that could possibly bring the world right side up. There is, however, another potential and glimmer of hope that could come from other blockchains, the altcoin world. And indeed, even if no altcoin or blockchain outside Bitcoin is truly decentralized, a wild, wild west of what might appear chaotic in the production of various goods and services of exchange and transmission will generate true innovation and enterprise, as each individual will compete with other individuals in the arena of various customers and people seeking solutions for their problems. It's a chance at true community and consensus, where individuals will gravitate towards the community that aligns with their beliefs, and each individual will be able to join and vote as part of the consensus with a token. The abstraction of value, the service and community generates as a consequence of what it offers to its members and potential members. And the existence and movement of each token will be stored on a ledger for all members to see. Of course, each community can define its ecosystem, but that's just it. A community or crypto or blockchain or token will be forced to honesty and civilization, as it would not want to lose out to competition for members, which will help fuel the continued growth, development, and flourishing of the ecosystem. It's like Hans Hermann Hoppes' characterization of the monarch, who owns his kingdom and property and is thus invested in the continued flourishing of his kingdom and property to propagate his dynasty, versus the democratically elected leader who owns nothing of the land and kingdom and is a mere caretaker, replaced every so years, and is thus not invested in the continued prosperity of the temporary post he occupies. And since his time is limited, given the power he has, the impetus for corruption and abuse is huge, as he will attempt to gain from the short time he has as caretaker, and as accountability doesn't come with a non-dynastic post, mistakes and failure will simply be absorbed by the next elected caretaker, who in turn will only temporarily have to solve problems in his mind, but never have to actually pay for any mistake. So, mistake upon mistake is made and passed on without anyone ever having to pay for any mistake. The caretaker gets the same salary. The monarch pays with the loss of value of his kingdom and property, and perhaps even his head. Similar situation can happen in a tokenized world. Even if all other blockchains and cryptocurrencies and assets have owners, if left to a free market world, these crypto owners will scramble for customers, clients, and community members, versus what happens in the highly regulated market of today, where the statist above has chosen a few groups and corporations to serve. Hence, customers scramble to find someone to serve them. It's a chance at stepping up and embracing accountability, as long as no centralizing group dominates and mandates everyone into order. Tokenization versus an algorithmic AI social credit system based on a list of what is proper behavior and belief mandated by a statist above. And in a tokenized world within a sea of anarchic exchanges with tokenized representations of their value is the one special standard to keep all in check. That single one that can't be hijacked, compromised, or controlled, as it is based on 0% trust and 100% verification, and will be scarce, as only 21 million will ever be created as dictated by an unhijackable algorithm that has already expended tumultuous amounts of energy that makes any attempt at an attack a unicorn. The probability would be a unique miracle to the one who dreams of ever compromising and cheating the Bitcoin system. Human nature, the reality of original sin, mathematics, logic, and economics were all properly built into the Bitcoin system. And while it was created by human design, the essence and continued development and growth is a consequence of human action. This is Web 3.0, a decentralized convergence of various systems of community and consensus, each captured by a token sold to represent the system or community's value. Will this bring the world right side up?